Now, the Australian left say we need to look to how Europe is embracing renewable energy. Well, let's do that. Just how's that working out for Europe? Well, the average annual energy bill surged 96% from last autumn in the UK, and with winter approaching, the cost of keeping a house warm is going to get even worse. And it's worth remembering that the UK's reliance on Russian gas is very low. They're not Germany. They only use around 3% from Russia. The invasion of Ukraine cannot be blamed for the enormous increase in prices, which began well before the invasion of Ukraine. Joining me now is GB News host and former leader of the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage. Nigel, how did it get to this? How did it get to a situation where so many Brits are in energy poverty?
Well, let's go back before the invasion of Ukraine. Already, we were paying the most expensive energy prices in the world, both as domestic consumers and as industrial users. Why? Well, because no country in Europe has gone for renewable energy as much as we have. Tony Blair started it, but the Tories, ever since 2010, have embraced it. In fact, Boris Johnson used to boast, we're going to become the Saudi Arabia of wind. And it sounds wonderful.
No, it does. It sounds crazy. It sounds crazy, well, Nigel. It doesn't sound wonderful. It does to you and I. It does to you and I, but not to the BBC and mainstream media and virtually everybody sitting in the Houses of Parliament. No, they all bought the narrative that there'd be limitless supply of very cheap energy. Here's the truth of it. Renewables are intermittent. And that means you have to have solid backups, gas, coal, whatever it may be, for those periods of time when the wind doesn't blow. Also, it doesn't fund itself without tax subsidy. And that tax subsidy has been loaded onto our bills. So the net effect, and you'll hear this in Australia too, you'll hear a jobs revolution, it's going to be wonderful. The net effect of our policies is that we have exported hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs to other parts of the world, and we now import energy that we need that we could produce at home. And I think Australia is headed down exactly that route. Well, we are. We're just a little bit further behind because we started a little bit later in earnest. But what would your advice be to the Australian government, who are just doubling down on the renewable energy? Well, you would call it a fantasy.
Take one long, cold, hard look at the old country and see what good it's done us. It's been an absolute disaster. And compare and contrast that with the USA, all right, who turned themselves around into being an energy exporter. They are paying less than half for their electricity and natural gas than we are on our side of the pond. And that's why, in relative terms, American business, American industry is doing so much better than all of Europe.
Now, we know the Tories have been captured by the climate alarmists, but where do Labor sit on this? Are they even worse with what their policies are?
I think across the board, Labour are worse than the Conservatives, but only very, very marginally. I mean, we finished up with a Conservative government with an 80-seat majority that is now committed to the highest taxes the UK's ever seen in peacetime, a fanaticism towards net zero that shows absolutely no signs of slowing whatsoever, a cross-channel invasion of illegal immigrants that they show no desire to stop. And frankly, the big debate now in the UK is what is the point of the Conservative Party? And frankly, I'm actually more against them than I am Labour, because they just lie to us at every election. They tell us they're about low taxes, small state, they're pro-business. They're none of those things. And I honestly think as we go into 2023, we're beginning to learn that Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak are globalists. I mean, after all, Sunak is our first ever Goldman Sachs Prime Minister. And I honestly, what is the point of voting Conservative? They are headed, in my view, for an even bigger loss than they suffered to Tony Blair all the way back in 1997, and it is going to be thoroughly deserved.
Well, absolutely. I'm with you as far as having disdain for imposters, people who pretend to be conservative but are nothing of the sort. And they won a massive landslide on the back of Brexit, on the back of their conservative credentials. And once in power, they became Labor. They became the Labor Party.
Wow.
And you've just described some of their climate change policies, which have could plunge 7 million Brits into energy poverty. It is absolutely shameful.